I want to say thank you everyone for joining us for our August Beyond the Fence Line call. Today we got a great line out. If you haven't seen our social medias here, we'll be having our board of directors this month will be Robert Groom. We have Zach Ducheneau talk to us about some FSA disaster relief programs, and then Martin Townsend's also going to be talking to us on some conservation tools to help make your guys' land profitable and sustainable.
Good morning. Yeah, this is Samantha Ferret, Region 6 Director for the United States Cattlemen's Association. I have a cow-calf operation outside of Towson, Montana, so southwest Montana, with my husband on his family's more than century-old ranch. We're raising registered and commercial limousine cattle. I grew up in agriculture and have a fierce passion for the industry, and happy to see so many folks on this morning. So welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Samantha. And it does look like Robert has joined us here now. Robert, thank you so much. If you want to give us a little background about yourself and then also why you joined U.S. Cattlemen's Association and just a little history on what you provide.
Robert Groom. I am the regional director for district or region 15, which is basically the northeast of the USA, all the New England states, New York and Pennsylvania, down into Delaware and New Jersey, and yeah, a bunch of states. So it's a big area, but there's you know, a lot of it's rural. I mean, a lot of people think of New York as, you know, New York City, but we're a long way from the city, and we're pretty rural. We're pretty conservative, and so we're tucked up here in upstate New York, trying to just get on with our lives. We run a registered Angus seed stock operation. We do have a few Charolais as well. Not too many, just a couple of them for interest. They're actually up at State Fair right now with my daughter, who we show cattle quite a bit during the summer. Our main business is selling bulls and to commercial guys, and we sell a few heifers as well. Make a little bit of hay, grow a few crops. I've been a USDA board member for 4 or 5 years now. I'm in my second term. I was originally appointed, I think, right at the kind of beginning of COVID or that year, and I've been on since then. I serve on a couple of committees. I'm on trade and marketing, and I'm also part of a task force that's looking into a couple of issues that we've been kind of working on pretty hard this spring, called substantial transformation and risk-based inspection, which relate directly to a lot of our woes in the cattle business and in the beef business. So that's a little bit about me. As you can tell, I got a pretty strong upstate New York accent, so if you're having trouble understanding me, I'll try and slow down a little bit.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. Robert is, again, one of our board of directors, and really appreciate the value and interest that he does bring to the United States Cattlemen's Association. So next up, we're going to have Zach Ducheneau, who's been a longtime supporter of United States Cattlemen's. Believe he's been on the board as well before my time with USDA, but also just getting done. Yeah. Just getting wrapped up also as administrator for the as secretary for the FSA offices. So Zach, would you want to kick us off today talking to us about some FSA disaster programs?
You bet. I'll give a real brief intro. I was on the board of directors for a couple of terms at the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, a big fan of the work that the U.S. Cattlemen's Association does, and that's why I'm back here with you all, because USCA makes the policy. They don't just get out on the fringe and fight. They get in the trenches and they help get the policy shifted. Some of the disaster programs we'll talk about today actually have been changed because of calls from the United States cattlemen in the last 4 years. So over the last 4 years, I got to be your FSA administrator. And during that time, we started that relationship. They told me, you can keep your cows. We like that you're a rancher, but you just can't make any cow policy. And I told them, baloney, that doesn't sound like any fun. So I gave my daughter my cows for love and other consideration. That was our farming ranching transition. I got a political appointment where we couldn't keep our assets and do policy. A little different approach than what's being taken now, but I digress. So I don't have any cows anymore. I got one ceremonial cow now so that I can be a member of the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, but still very committed to the cause. In the United States Department of Agriculture, most of the disaster programs that are going to be meaningful to cattle producers live within the FPAC mission area. And before I get into the particular programs, I just want to talk about policy construction a little bit, because that's important to know, because it's important to understand where the discretion for the delivery of these programs resides, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. And by state, I mean the state level federal offices. So Congress will authorize in a statute a disaster program. For instance, the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, NAP. There's an authorizing statute. Within that statute, there are details that Congress doesn't have the time or knowledge, frankly, to get into. So they leave discretion to the secretary. The secretary shall or may do X, Y, Z. Where the secretary has discretion, the agency will put forward regulations that are approved by the department, and then the regulations give the next level of guidance and clarification of that discretion. There is still too much nuance and subtlety in all of the diversity of agriculture across the country to really codify all of that and to account for every situation. In a permissive environment, the agency likes to preserve some discretion so decisions can be made out at the local office. So when that discretion that Congress gives to the secretary is conferred to the agency administrator through a rule, the administrator will then promulgate what's known as a policy, an administrative notice, or a handbook. Within the policies, administrative notices, and the handbook, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And that's where the producer can get online, read those manuals, read those handbooks, and start to make their own case for why they should be able to participate in these disaster programs. Beyond that, sometimes the discretion lives with your county office. When that discretion lives with your county office and they make a discretionary decision against you, you always have the ability to appeal that decision to your county committee and to your state committee, which in many cases are producers just exactly like you. So it's important when those opportunities to serve on those local committees present themselves that you take advantage of them, because it might be your desk that the discretion comes to. And you might get to say, yeah, I think we should move this policy in this direction and get producers who've been affected like this in the door. So that's the policy construction aspect of it. I'll talk briefly about the programs, but then would gladly answer any questions before I wrap up with some comments about what to do to be prepared. So in the FSA, and we'll stay in the FSA realm for now, but I'll touch on the other aspects of the mission area, the NRCS or RMA programs. In the FSA, NAP is one of the primary programs. It's the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. And that's just what it says. It's for everything that you can't get commercial crop insurance for, or even federally subsidized crop insurance for. And NAP covers blizzard, fire, hurricane, excessive moisture, excessive winds, drought, hail. It runs the entire gamut of disasters. You apply for NAP ahead of time. You turn in the acres and what you expect to grow. And then when you have a disaster, you file a notice of loss. important in NAP and important in some of these programs. You file an initial notice of loss, but then part two is you actually file a loss claim. Many times, the notice of loss will get denied at the local office if that office takes an overly conservative approach to delivery of these programs. For instance, in my home office, I've got a cousin who's the county executive director there. And if we have a drought or a fire or a hailstorm and we turn in a notice of loss, his position is, well, it could go to rain and then things could get better. Well, that's bullshit. If you lose that opportunity to produce into the growing season, you don't have the opportunity to recover enough. There's only so much growth potential remaining in those growing days. So when he tells me that on my notice of loss, I don't accept that and I file a loss claim anyway. The notice of loss, because it's broad ranging beyond just your operation, you're saying, hey, there was a blizzard. Well, the notice of loss is then considered and they can deny the notice of loss, but they cannot deny you from submitting a loss claim. It's one of the things that we tried to work on as we were wrapping up our first term in the Biden-Harris administration to eliminate that notice of loss altogether, because all that does is serve as a tool to discourage people from filing a loss claim when they've had an actual loss. Because we believe a producer isn't going to file a goddamn loss claim unless they had an actual loss, because especially in the cattle industry, we're more independent. We don't want to just keep coming over there to that office. So when we come there, we've got a legitimate, valid reason. Within the USDA, there's also the tree assistance program. So if any of you are doing forestry or silvopasture, tree assistance program is covered by all of those same disaster events. And it provides a cost share to help you replace those trees that you lost that were part of your ag production operation. Next is the dairy indemnity program. It's more limited in scope because of the way the statute reads. It's only for pesticide contamination, nuclear radiation fallout, toxic substances other than pesticides, chemical residue other than pesticides, but a valuable program nonetheless if you've got a dairy and a beef dairy operation. Next, we'll get into the Conservation Reserve Program. Now, everybody thinks of the CRP program as the set-aside program, where all you do is take land out of production, leave it idle, and it just sits there and goes back to whatever wild is. One, I'll preface this by saying I don't agree with that approach. I don't think there's an acre of CRP that shouldn't have a cow or a sheep or a goat grazing through it at least once a year. But we didn't get there with our policy making either in the last 4 years. We're still pushing. But in CRP, there's what's known as emergency haying and grazing. And in times of disaster, the secretary and the administrator at the FSA have the authority to open up CRP acres for haying or grazing. And what we did in the previous administration, if you think back to the fires in the panhandle of Texas, we opened CRP for haying and grazing in several surrounding states so that those producers who lost all of their grazing land could either take their cows to some of this CRP land, or they could make connections with those producers that had it to get that land hayed and then to donate it to them. It's the real reserve part of the Conservation Reserve Program. I think in 2022, over 3 million acres of CRP land was opened up for emergency haying or grazing. The Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish Program, called ELAP, is really the catch-all program that the FSA has for anything else that isn't covered by one of the standing disaster programs. An example of what we were able to do with a progressive approach to disaster assistance for ELAP exists in North Dakota. In 2021, Senator Hoeven called us and said, hey, we've got producers that are in danger of having to sell their livestock, sell their base herd because of the drought. What can we do? So we went to work with his team and we constructed some new policy because the statute gave us flexibility. And in that new policy, we created a program where we could assist with the freight on getting feed delivered into a overly large drought area. All of western North Dakota, a lot of eastern North Dakota, central and south central North Dakota were all in the grips of a 2-year drought. Producers didn't have feed back then, and they were going to have to sell their cow herd. There were projections that North Dakota was going to lose up to a third or 2/5 of their cow herd. Because of this program, we were able to offer some freight assistance to those producers in getting freight from western Minnesota where things were good, or coming over the mountains to eastern Washington to get some feed delivered in to keep their cow herd together. And I want to point out right here how important thoughtful federal policy is, because had we not done that, many of those producers would have had to sell their production cow herd at fire sale prices and wouldn't be riding this wave that we're on with feeder cattle right now. The impacts of a $6 a mile payment to producers to get loads of feed into their cows are now in the hundreds of millions of dollars for North Dakota. So it was a great investment of federal resources, a great use of taxpayer dollars to help keep that beef industry together in North Dakota. So really happy with the work we did in that program. So the next program I'll talk about in the FSA, again, it's tree related. It's the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. And that also helps provide funding for privately owned forests in times of natural disaster. And this can help with cleanup. If you had a hurricane or a derecho come through and blow your trees over onto your fence line, you can help get your fence line replaced and a lot of things like that. The farm loan programs has a aspect of it for emergencies. We did some work to try to make that easier to get access to in the last year of our administration. Basically what that is you come in on your time frame, you make an agreement with the FSA to borrow some money to get you through this disaster, and you're effectively spreading the cost of that disaster over the next few production seasons, sort of like retroactive crop insurance. You're spreading the impact. The next one I want to talk about, and these are the two that really resonate and land with our cattle producers. The Livestock Forage Disaster Program. Now that program is unique in that it only covers fire. I'll share a spreadsheet with you that can help you understand this better. It's disasters at a glance. Fire, drought, and it's tied directly to the US Drought Monitor. You can just type into your search bar US Drought Monitor. You can pull that up and you can see which category you're in. It triggers when you're at a drought intensity of 2, which I think is 4 to 8 weeks of sustained dry conditions. And it triggers a level of payment based on the amount of feed. This is one of the cases where the statute is really proscriptive and there's not a lot of flexibility for the agency to do anything different. But that does give you some strength and latitude, and it ties it directly to the drought monitor so you know exactly where you're at. It can do up to 60% of the cost of feed for up to 5 months a year. So it's really aimed at helping with regard to the growing season, the grazing season. Last one I'll touch on real quick and then stay for questions if there's time, is the Livestock Indemnity Program. And this is another of the policies that was changed from input by the United States Cattlemen's Association, because we had some terrific blizzards in western South Dakota and producers were struggling to document the losses because, as many of you know that are out in that part of the country, if you're calving and you get a blizzard, you might not see the carcass of that calf or realize that it's lost until branding time. If you don't brand till late, or if you don't brand your calves at all, you might not realize it till you put them on the truck. So we got a call from your board president, and we made some policy changes and offered some discretion to our local offices to make sure we get folks in the door. The livestock indemnity program will indemnify a producer up to 75% of the loss value of the animal. So with all of these programs, it's important to note none of them are intended to make a producer fully whole. So if you lose a $2,000 cow, none of these programs are aimed at giving you $2,000. So it's important to take a look in your business plan and see if you've got the opportunity and the cash flow to have a supplemental commercial insurance policy to cover that additional loss. These programs are there kind of as a backstop to prevent the worst from happening, and having a natural disaster that's beyond your control really take out your business. The LIP program is another one where you turn in a notice of loss and then you file a loss application. Again, if you turn in a notice of loss, do not take no for an answer there. File a loss application. The reason is if the FSA or any agency is making a broadly applicable determination, you don't have any personal appeal rights. So if the FSA says, well, that weather wasn't bad enough in north central Montana, so we're not going to approve of your notice of loss, but you were in an isolated county where it was pretty goddamn bad, you can still file a loss claim and receive assistance if you had some cows blow across a dam and fall in, or get lost in a gully and get snowed under. So it's important that you don't take no for an answer, not just with regard to notice of loss, but ever. I mean, if we all just sit back and take no for an answer when we're talking about how are we going to participate in the safety net that's created to empower us all to be part of feeding and clothing America and the world, you know, it becomes a pretty dog eat dog world. There's a reason for these programs. We shouldn't feel ashamed for using them, because I'll guarantee you those crop insurance companies that are coming in the door and getting the subsidies and then getting the operations money to go ahead and operate their crop insurance company, they're not hanging their head when they come in the door, and they're doing pretty good. So let's make sure that we take advantage of these opportunities, use them, use your policymakers, take advantage of the opportunity to serve on that county committee and be a policymaker. Look to that state committee. I don't think all of them are seated yet. So if some of you have proclivities to be involved in that at that level, throw your name in the hopper. Get a hold of Administrator Beam and say, hey, I want to be on your state committee for my state. You might be there and be in a position to make sure that the reality of your producers is being accounted for in federal policy and in the deployment of these safety net programs. There is a document that I will drop in the chat here, and it's called Disasters at a Glance. It's a very handy tool. And if any of you are interested in diving deeper into the policy, reach out to me via email. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And I'll share with you a link to the manuals that the USDA and the FSA are going to use in order to administer your programs. One other program, Emergency Conservation Program. That is exactly what it says, a conservation program. You got dams that wash out because of a 50-year flood event. ECP can come in and help cost share the repair of those dams because it has broader ranging conservation concerns for the watershed, for the ecosystem, for your county, your state, and for American society. So didn't want to leave that one off. It's an important one as well. That one is housed, the authority to deploy that program is housed at the county committee level. I went a little long, Maggie, but there's a lot of opportunity there for producers, and I want to make sure
Yes.
we don't get to share it.
Yeah, no, like Zach had said, there's lots of opportunities out there. Make sure we're to help you guys out when disaster does strike, or just needing some things to help kind of offset that cost there with any weather there. Any questions today for Zach? Oh, we got a quiet bunch this morning.
Maggie, if there aren't any questions, I'll just wrap up. Documentation is key in this. Have your production records, know how many critters you've got out there at different stages of the day. Make sure you do your acreage reporting at the local office because everything's going to tie back to that acreage report. So be ready to document that, be ready to share that with folks. And these are critical. I mean, if you think about a producer in North Dakota who might have had to sell their calf crop and their producing cows in 2021, having to miss the last 3 years of prices, but for a good federal program to help them stay on the farm. We lose farms, we lose ranches, we lose legacy that has been out there for multiple generations. And what we tried to stress in the administration is that a calf crop and a cow herd are different than a annual crop of grain. Put an entire life of genetic selection, sometimes generations of genetic selection into that cow herd. So when you lose that, it's more akin to losing the land than it is to losing that crop. So take advantage of the opportunities. My email and phone number are in the chat. If you have any questions and you're just not a question asker in a public forum, that's cool. I've been there myself, but reach out and let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Robert, did you have a question?
I got a couple. One is the disaster payment plan. He said it pays about 3/4 of the value, roughly. So like 1,500 out of a $2,000 cow, you would get 1,500. Is there any commercially available like gap insurance programs or plans that can be bought that would cover that? Like if you write off a vehicle and there's a difference between its write-off value and its book value, something that will pick up the tab there that you could pay insurance for. And then the other question was that I think it was a NAP program. You talked about it early on. Do you have to comply with other like acreage reporting things or programs in order to sign up for NAP, which just would give them an indication of what you're going to plant or what you're going to grow rather than precise numbers?
Yeah, NAP is based on acreage reporting as well. You have to report your expected production and then report your actual production, because the idea with NAP is they're going to use your actual production to calculate your loss. And so think about it this way. If we all think that we're at the cutting edge of production and agriculture, and we wouldn't want to have Jim Farmer's production applied to ours because we think we're doing it better. NAP is built around your own production numbers. That's why it's important to offer them. Your first year in, you're going to get the T yield. That's what's known as the county average. But as you start to build your record of production, NAP should link to your actual production if you're doing it better and getting a little more production out of your natural resources. Really good question. So, but it is key that you do crop reporting, acreage reporting to participate in that program. You can file late reports. Another thing that I should have said, never take no for an answer. Always say, I am going to file a late application, because your county committee has the discretion to accept late applications in many cases. That was the key change we made out there in western South Dakota when Mr. Tupper called. So yeah, we're going to accept these late applications. If we can accept a late application, there's no reason to be an asshole and just not accept it because you were still surviving the storm or whatever. So good question. With regard to covering the rest of the loss, important to know about the livestock indemnity program is that it does not penalize you if you do carry private crop insurance. I don't know of any federally subsidized multi-peril insurance products that you can get for livestock, but I do know that there are commercially available multi-peril livestock coverage policies that you can make the decision to elect. You can get blizzard coverage in South Dakota. I imagine you can get flood coverage in the floodplain. You've probably got an insurance agent in your local community that can give you better information about that. But again, LIP, the Livestock Indemnity Program, doesn't penalize you for that. So you can be extra covered but it's going to come out of your pocket and it's not going to be federally subsidized premiums. It's going to be all the premiums that you pay.
Right.
Good question.
But it might represent a smaller value, so that the cost itself wouldn't be as onerous as if you're insuring the whole animal.
Yeah, well, I never thought about just insuring the balance, but if I was going to buy that policy, my personal inclination when I have carried multi-peril insurance, I'm insuring the whole value of the cow, not just what the government isn't covering. Because then if you lose the cow, the government program you're still eligible for, your private insurance that you've paid your money for, and there's no taxpayer cost of expense, that insurance company should cover the whole damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good question.
All right, thank you, Robert. One more if for now, and then we'll move on through. So Jess.
Yeah, no, just thanks again, former Administrator Zach Ducheneau, just done an incredible job, and just everyone on the call. I know a lot of folks come in here later on and watch these, and that's what we're doing right now is promoting them vis-a-vis social media and getting out and about. So if you're catching this call later on, just you've got the information for former Administrator Zach Ducheneau. I think what's been so tremendous about Zach, one of his predecessors, Brandon Willis, is they live it. And you heard from Zach directly, they live it. And so when they live it and they work it, it's very unique in Washington, D.C. And Zach is one of the best there. So I can't count the number of times we went back and forth and trying to come up with these recommendations and ideas, and coming from perspective of been denied on so many levels in so many ways at the Farm Service Agency office I can't count, but coming back to it and then seeing how those programs can work, seeing how the staff will be just tremendous when that opportunity presents itself, because we provided that clarity. So if you've ever been frustrated in an FSA office, get involved. And Zach knows that too. I mean, oftentimes they're just as frustrated too, saying, well, I have to round hole square peg. I can't work with you. But as Zach said, file that claim, get in front of your committee. And if your committee doesn't modify it, what Administrator Ducheneau showed us was they can make those changes at the high level and relatively quick. So do not lose faith, do not lose hope. And I got to tell you, there are folks of you that are literally watching this right now that I have faith are going to make the call and are going to make some positive changes and say, hey, I watched that U.S. Cattlemen's Beyond the Fence Line piece and I got involved. So that's exactly what it is. So the last thing we want to hear is anyone saying, I'll just throw up your hands. Don't. And it's good intended people on both sides of that desk. There really is. On the other side, they're trying. Sometimes maybe someone isn't having a good day at work, but 9 times out of 10, they don't quite have the guidance that they'd like. And so what Zach said is spot on. And what it takes is you calling up Zach Ducheneau or having a better idea, getting over to U.S. Cattlemen's Farm Bill Committee and places like that. So just can't encourage folks enough. I can tell you on both sides of it, I've had my frustration, but I've also been very inspired by getting the programs in place, working with FSA. I haven't received it so much as helping others. And I think that's been amazing.
Well, you should get your ass in the office and get entered up in these programs. God damn it. You're a tax-paying citizen and you're entitled to them. But I want to leave off with one story because it reminded me when we did that ELAP change to pay freight on feed. I got a call from some yard bird out in Montana, and he said, "Hey Zach, I think you guys need to sharpen your pencils up because I got a friend here who can walk you through how it's more economical and a better deal for everybody if we haul the cattle to where the feed are at." And Jess Peterson, U.S. Cattlemen Association Executive Vice President, got me on a call with a guy. We walked through that. And instead of saying no, we created the program, figure out a way to do this. Within 6 weeks, we rolled out a program change to a brand new program to make sure that it allowed for those producers to haul their critters to where the feed was, because it was more economical for them to make one load than several. And that's how policy change can happen when you have the right frame of mind as a policy making, policy advising organization, and the right type of policymakers in the office, folks that want to build that out instead of restrict it and confine it to what we already do. So that's really a great point to leave off on, Jess. Thanks again, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. I'll shut up and listen for a while.
Well, thank you again, Zach. We really do appreciate all the work you have done for us and continued work on educating and just helping us continue anything policy-wise that needs to be changed. All right, next we're going to be going to our ringside recap. I have Katie Rubin here with you. Unadilla Livestock Company, and if I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that right, Gru.
You've got it
Unadilla,
right.
yeah.
Oh, perfect. And just to give us kind of a recap, they are out of Robert's neck of the woods in New York. So they're just going to give us kind of a snapshot of what their cattle markets and other livestock markets are kind of doing up in that area. So Katie, I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. It was kind of an out of the blue surprise call, but I really appreciate the opportunity. So just a little bit of background for myself, like everyone else shared. I am fourth generation on a family farm. Prior to my time, we were dairy farming on both my mom and dad's side. That ended right around when I was born, and my dad is a livestock dealer. In terms of the home business, run a business buying and selling horses. We diversified a bit. My dad will handle cattle, goats, sheep, pigs, and I'm on the horse end of it because it works a lot better sometimes to get along working with family when you all have your different parts. But 6 years ago, actually this week, I became a partner in what is called Unadilla Livestock Company. It is a sale barn in Unadilla, New York, kind of right smack dab in the middle of the state where 90 miles from Binghamton and Albany, about 150 miles or so from New York City. The sale barn was previously owned by a family that had been here for multiple generations. The sale barn was going to be closing. They were wanting out of it. And my dad buys quite a few cattle here as a dealer. And I saw an opportunity in terms of the horse sale where their horse sale had really dwindled down. They were having, 20, 30 head, maybe 60 on a special. And I said, I can do better than this. I had been running some sales in other places, and it seemed like a good time to opt in and put everything in one place. At the time, I was also a school social worker. So going back to what we were just talking about in terms of policy and programming and FSA, folks go out there and get what is there for you. And sometimes you're going to have to fight for it and push for it. But as a social worker who dealt with helping people get the aid that is available to them, I can definitely say that's something that folks need to take advantage of. But anyways, back to the sale barn here. We're celebrating our 6th anniversary this year. When I started, I was just managing the horse sale. We brought our horse sale from averaging 60 to 80 head when we first started to last month, I had 167 head, which really that's kind of our capacity. We have a horse sale coming up this Saturday, expecting about 150. So initially, when I started here at Unadilla Livestock, my plan was to be a horse sale manager. And then, as we know in this industry, things can change pretty rapidly. And I had some staffing difficulties in the office, and it looked like it was time for me to be here full time rather than be at the school and be remotely managing. So I still have another manager that oversees the cow sale, but I'm handling all of the office and a lot of the phone calls, and kind of become the role of overall manager for everything rather than just the horse sales. But it's going very well. I really enjoy it, and it is very exciting to be a part of what my family has done for so many years, but again, making my own waves as well. In terms of the cattle right now, we average here just over 500 head, 500, 550 most weeks. And that would be cattle, goats, sheep, and pigs. And then we also have a quite large small animal sale in terms of chickens and rabbits and that stuff. So we have a sale every Wednesday starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we generally sell straight through from 10 a.m. to probably 7, 8 o'clock at night between all of the pieces and parts. Averaging around 100, 150 head of goats and sheep a week, typically 100 and 120 head of cull cattle, dairy, and beef. Feeders, it depends on the week. Some weeks we have 30 or 40. The last 2 weeks we've had 50 head, and then last week we had 90 head of feeder cattle. So we have a nice variation. The area we're in New York is a lot different than a lot of other places. It used to be predominantly dairy farms. The county adjoining us, Delaware County, had about 900 dairy farms at their maximum, and now there's just over 100. So we're in a really big period of transition here where unfortunately we're losing a lot of those small dairies, but we are seeing a tremendous increase in our area in beef operations. A lot of them are relatively small, not the kind of stuff that we're going to see out west that most of the folks on this call are talking about, but you know, your guys who are producing 10, 12, 20 feeders a year, some guys producing 6, 8, 10 feeders a year. But once you bring them all together, it adds up. In terms of what we're seeing in the market right now, the biggest thing I can tell you is everything is higher than we've ever seen it here before. I talked to a couple different people yesterday at the sale, a dairy guy, you know, a guy who mostly brings and buys calves, some of our beef buyers, and really across the board, the sentiment is that these cattle are just high and nobody can see where it's going to end. And it's almost a little bit scary because it's wonderful for the farmer, but it's not really making sense how it's going to add up in the end and what the price of beef is going to be for our folks in the grocery store. It just seems like it might not be sustainable, but we certainly as a commission market hope that it is. I don't know if you wanted, you know, specific numbers or what exactly you were looking for, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take this conversation in whatever direction you want me to present.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, if you could give us just kind of a little snapshot. My family runs a sale barn, both cattle and sheep as well. So just kind of see those general markets of out this area. What were those feeders and those, maybe even some on the sheep side, kind of bring in that your last sale?
Sure, absolutely. So I pulled out some numbers from the past 2 sales, and I guess where I'd really like to start, honestly, is the baby calves, because this is just the wildest thing that we've got going right now. And we have a lot of producers and a lot of regular big beef buyers that come to our sale, but we also have a lot of individuals who come in and want to purchase, you know, a couple animals for the backyard. And I'll have folks come in to me and say, I don't understand what the auctioneer is saying with these baby calves. You know, is he selling them for 60 cents a pound or $6 a pound or $16 a pound? And every answer is right. So with the baby calves right now, we are seeing calves anywhere on the bob calf end from, you know, 60 cents to $2. So we're seeing these beef breed calves and beef cross calves bring $16, $17 a pound, depending what they're weighing. So that is a whole new world. In terms of the feeder cattle, again, it's going to vary depending on the quality pretty tremendously. And that's one of the things that I think is probably a little bit different here than maybe some of your bigger areas in the West where you have larger scale productions with like what we were talking about before, those years of legacy and generation and genetic building behind them. We've got a lot more variety going on here. So we're going to have some nice quality feeder calves, and then we're going to have your kind of backyard mix of feeder calves. So just pulling up our market reports from yesterday's sale, we were seeing feeders, I mean, the majority well over $2. Our high feeder calf, I believe yesterday was $3.80. The week before it was $4.05 a pound on some of those lighter calves weighing in the 2s and lighter 3s. Your 400 and 500 pound calves are definitely kind of where it's at in terms of adding up to the most in the end for folks. The cow market as well, in terms of the cull cows, are astronomically high. You know, we're seeing the cull cows averaging in the $1.55, $1.60 range. And those mostly, you know, we get quite a few beef culls coming out of the pasture, but these are a lot of dairy culls coming out of people's barns, you know, where they're no longer milking and no longer producing. So we get a nice variety, and the cow market's been very high, which really has been tremendously helpful to the farmers in this region where farming is not ideal. It is not as supported. You know, just hearing him talk about FSA and the programs, we have one FSA person that's covering multiple counties. So when we're talking about a committee or a team or available options, that's something, unfortunately, that's been cut in this area. We do not have a lot of support for our farmers. And most people, like when they think about New York State, do not think farming. You know, they think New York City, and my family's farm is only 90 miles outside of New York City. And we actually go into the city with livestock to some of the live markets that are there. But New York is not a tremendously supportive state in terms of agriculture. But back to the market reporting, sorry, I kind of got on a tangent there. But in terms of sheep and goats, that's another thing that can really be all over the map, and it's going to depend on the quality. The lambs that people are putting on feed are going to obviously do better than a lot of the pasture raised lambs that we're seeing this time of year. And we get quite a variety. Again, we have some Amish that bring in bigger groups, and then we have, just here and there a couple. The goat market has stayed consistently high. We've seen goats the past 2 weeks over $500 on some of the bigger castrated steer goats. But again, all over the map, depending on size and quality and breed. And I love when people call and say, what is my goat worth? And it's like, well, is it little? Is it big? Is it a Nigerian dwarf? Is it a Boer goat? And a lot of times they don't know.
Well, thank you. Any questions here for Katie today? Well, I kind of weird. If I'm ever out in that area, I like to on vacations. I go to different sale barns just to kind of go check them out. So Katie, I will be putting you on a sale barn spot to stop one day and kind of get to see your guys' operation. So thank you again so much for coming on today, and we'll move on here to Martin Townsend. And he's going to be talking to us a little bit about some different conservation tools that we can use on our daily operations. So Martin, I'll kick it off to you. We can't quite hear you.
I mean, we know the partnership's strong, Martin, but we got to get off mute. There it
Yeah,
is. I just had to start talking. Get your boots on the ground. Let's go.
Right. Deal. So I'm Martin Townsend. I work with a group called Ranchers Stewardship Alliance out of North Central Montana. We have an interesting organization where we're a rancher-led nonprofit that works a lot with the wildlife conservation arena on ranch-focused projects that are intended to make both habitat, wildlife value, and ranching production more capable and more possible. So I had a couple tools I was going to share that have come out of the wildlife sphere, but are immensely helpful when looking at like new leases or pasture production or things along the line of that a beginning producer might be looking into. So hopefully you guys are seeing a screen with a whole pile of buttons and maps and pictures on it. So this is a USDA developed program called the Rangeland Analysis Platform. There's the standard version of it that looks at like habitat and like grass cover types. I'll come back to that if there's more time, but a really, really useful thing that they made as part of this is this Production Explorer tool. So if I go over here and open it, you can either import a map or draw if you know where your pasture is. Pick a pasture, run a time series on it, and see how it has done as far as grass production across a whole series of years dating back into the 1980s. The end all product of it is you can use it to determine if you're like looking at a new property that you might want to lease. You're being told what it runs, but you want to know what it runs. You can pull this up, run a stocking rate on it, and get an average, a low, a high, and a range. So I picked a pasture off my uncle's ranch, ran it, and it gives you all kinds of information of how it determined that. I ran just a standard AUM of 1,000 pounds at 3% a day. And this came out to 3.7 acres per head for a month. So that's a great tool to kind of guess what an average production is. If you're going into a year and you think like this year kind of feels like it's really similar to 2022, you can pick it for a specific year and see how it did. It also can give you average production through time. So this is a fun way to see if production in a pasture is going up or down through time, or if like you had a big Japanese brome year that supplied a lot of production. And then it gives current year production. So this is based on satellite green response every 2 weeks. And so it shows in this 2-week period, it grew 100 pounds of the acre. And basically you can see if you're done growing for the year, or like where we're at this year, it finally rained now at the end of July and August. So we're getting a little pickup again. We have grass growing again. That's my fast overview of that one. Especially where we are, it's not necessarily that grass limits us on production. Water might be the bigger issue. There's tools that can look at how likely water is to stay there. All of these tools are made by grad students and mostly for grad students, so they're not super straightforward on what they actually do, but this one's kind of unique because it can show different water values through time. So you can compare, like, does this reservoir, pit, or stream have water in May, and does it again in August? So I had an example open of that same pasture, and then I scrolled and I shouldn't have because it'll take a second to reload. But on the left is May, and you can see basically over here the spread of that water in May. It goes all the way out to the picture of these reservoirs versus an average August through that 7-year period, it shrinks down quite a bit. So if you were in a pasture like this one that relies completely on this reservoir, you might play with your months to know that it's going to run out of water late in summer and not use that pasture going into summer. Production Explorer. Another neat feature is they made a tool that took original aerial photography from like the Cold War era, matched it to the map, and they ran this slider bar that you can go forward and back. So we use this a lot to see if, like, we've lost trees in riparian areas, if some old crested wheatgrass was farmed, how recently, because this is probably late 40s to early 50s imagery, so we can see some differences in what land cover was like. And then another super fun thing to do with it is go to growing towns. Like, I grew up outside of Bozeman, Montana, that's exploding, and it's kind of fun to see where town is now and where it didn't used to be. I know we're low on time, so that's my 500-mile-an-hour overview of these. I think I'll stop there for any questions on those.
And if there is any detail that you want to go into, don't feel too rushed on time here. We can go over and things like that. Is there any questions real quick, or Martin, anything else you would like to kind of focus a little more on?
Yeah, I'll throw the links in the chat, and I think a big thing as a beginning producer for any of these tools, and then for really any program that's went over today, having a set of maps is crucially important. Where and how you get that set of maps is really dependent on where you are, whether your NRCS office can help you or if you're dealing with somebody else that is working on your maps. I think that's a big point, is to make sure you have those maps ready so you can go into your NRCS office, you can chase down a lead on what a carbon contract might look like. You can go into different programs with your information, and basically save a bunch of time of having to have that person develop all of that. And then I think a thing that gets missed in a lot of ranching areas is to really, really look into the wildlife sector as a potential investment partner in anything you're adding. There's different initiatives, different special focuses all around the country that have at least some version of agriculture production as a possible outcome of them, whether it's, I know there's like a black bear initiative out of the Southeast, or where we are, sage grouse, central part of the US, like prairie chickens. So there can be different animal species that get talked about of we're trying to do things that help that habitat, that oftentimes, because ranches support tons of wildlife across the country, have huge ranching outcomes that would be super beneficial for people as well to look into as a possible tool for any, especially infrastructure projects that you're looking to do on ranches. So like for us around sage grouse, we do a ton of grazing improvements. We take a lot of expired CRP ground and add grazing infrastructure to it so it stays in grasslands and adds grazing, and oftentimes that's where beginning producers are finding most of their grazing in our area. Yeah, I think I'd like to go to questions. If anybody has anything they want me to go through.
Martin, you're always on the road, the Traveling Road Show with Martin Townsend. You're here today. We're grateful. Some good tools. We're putting that in the chat. We're getting that out there. A lot of folks are going to hit this up later. Of course, we got a great turnout here today. What's coming up? You make the rounds. Anything coming up here for the fall sessions, for workshops or stuff that you like to get out and about to, or seeing things coming down the line? I think a lot of these, it kind of comes down to that. This is a great informational tour. Sometimes there's that kind of that social interaction. What's coming down the line? You're going to be in some places that folks can find you.
So the Montana Grazing Coalition is doing a grazing expo in September. That's going to be really good. I'll probably see you guys at Society for Range this winter. Always like that one. I think a lot of different organizations really have their events fired back up again after different funding issues this winter and spring. So there's definitely a bunch that are starting off. I'm the most familiar with Montana one, so that Grazing Expo is the one that's coming. Rancher Stewardship Alliance has a grazing clinic that just got postponed until the middle of September. That's going to be good. I'll go find a link for that.
Yeah, that'll be in Billings or that Grazing Expo, September 4th through the 7th. So folks are checking that out. And then Martin, he'll be there. You're not going to be presenting on this tool, are you? You'll just be out and about there, correct?
Yep, us and some ranchers from RSA will be there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great lineup. So here in Billings, folks, September 4th through the 7th, and then again, keep looking around. I think one of the best things we've had for our operation is you see this presentation and you're like, oh, that seems pretty good, and then you're sitting in a meeting going, oh wait, where was that? So access it on next gen on Beyond the Fence Line here at US Cattlemen's, and then of course too get to these conferences. And I think the great thing about where we're at, and I appreciate what Katie talked about there in the Northeast. They've got a great network of producers. You're in the group, and so you kind of know your sale barn and whatnot, and you stick with that group. In the West, we're a little more spread out, but we all drive 500 miles, 1,000 miles to get to that one grazing conference. So we'll all join up and sync up. So for those of you that are checking this out, do try to get to those in person. We can that and whatnot. So, and thanks again, Katie, for being on. Katie just came off it. Thanks a lot, Katie. And Martin, that was great as always. So I'll turn it back to you, Maggie. We're very, very fortunate this morning with the wealth of information being shared here on the next gen Beyond the Fence Line. Great work, everyone. Thanks. Back to you, Maggie.
All right, thank you, Jess. Yes, again, that ranging or grazing expo is coming up here just next week or 2 weeks here from now, the 4th through the 7th. We will be having some people in attendance. I hope some of you can see your guys' faces while we're there too. Just as we close things out here today, thank you again for everyone who took the time to present, and we really are kind of shaping up. This recording will be a little delayed on getting posted onto our YouTube channel and our website. So just give us patience in that. I'm hoping to get it up either on Monday afternoon. And if there's any questions, you can always give us a call at the office here at 406-670-0530, or email us at uscattlemans@uscattlemans.org, or my email, maggie@wssdc.com. We're always looking for suggestions for our next calls, and just kind of want to hear guys' feedback on how things are going and where we could be shaping things up. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us for our August call. If you missed anything there at the beginning or here at the end, we will have the recording up on Monday. So thank you, and you guys have a great rest of your week and weekend, and hope to see you guys in September.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, speakers. Great to have everyone on. Thanks, everyone.